Yes. You guys need the Wi-Fi password? It's co-working username, password. It's cowork0601. Oh, sorry. As I was saying, sorry, welcome to BocaJS. Hey, we're here to see Jeff. But first, BocaJS has all these videos. All the events that you've ever been to have been on here, has been recorded. And sometimes I record even the audio. This is what's going to happen today, basically. I've actually made mistakes and not recorded the audios. Most of the time I do, and I also record other events. So if you check out videos about BocaJS.org, they'll forward you to the YouTube channel, which we don't officially have yet. We need enough subscribers to get there. With your help, you get subscribed on YouTube, we will have those subscribers. But right now, go to videos.BocaJS.org. BocaJS.org is a brand new website we've built with some history about us, and more importantly, a link every single day to the Meetup page. If you go to the front page every single day, whenever, including today, you're going to get whatever is happening either today or coming up the next month. We don't have much in there, but we are on Twitter. Believe it or not, I had to ask Twitter formally to get this, which was used by somebody else, to badmouth us. No, it wasn't actually used for anything. And recently, I just created it 6 years ago and dropped it. This opportunity, I would have paid them millions. Instead, I just, sued them. No, I didn't. I went to Twitter. You can ask for that. By the way, if you guys want to know how I did it, you can ask me. We now have this, so go ahead and sign up. There's 31 of you guys, thank you, already signed up. So check out the news. I'll send out not only the events you can find at meetup.com, but also discounts as we always do. If you don't sign up to our newsletter, make sure you do so. We get discounts from 10% to 75% to any JavaScript related or developer conference around. If there's anything we can get for you guys, I don't send it to you guys if I don't get a coupon. In fact, you guys all missed it. It's a Angular's training. Sorry, because there was no coupon. I was too proud to get a coupon. Alright, I'm too proud to say that. No, if there is an event, I will send you guys. I might have said that actually. But check out the Twitter, us on Twitter. July 28th, unlike normally, we meet the first Tuesday of the month, as in today, but at the end of the month, the Palm Beach JavaScript group, as well as us, and Miami.js, and Broward.js, and Hialeah.js, I don't know how many groups are getting together. Check out our Meetup.com website, or check out the actual BocaJS.org. I'll have all the links and all that. If you want to know how to do sumo wrestling with your robots, how to do this, how to do that, and not have to learn C? What is it going on? C++. C, you do it on JavaScript. We'll show you how to do it on 28. Oh, by the way, Microsoft just gave us a bunch of money. So see all the stuff you see here? If you come, you get to keep it and take it home. This you cannot take home. Cody Commander is with us, so yeah, I have a little tiny channel. She has this very famous channel. Everybody's following her, thousands and thousands of people. She's doing it.
Only the cool people follow me. It's just like the coolest, few people.
I see it all over the place. I see it just everybody talking. Apparently I do. I appreciate it. She'll be presenting something you guys have been asking about before, so it's wonderful that I show you guys all these wonderful things about how to do things in Node. How will be connected to the database and make it a real website. She's going to be creating, so she just chose something a little bit sophisticated. Simple CMS. Screw WordPress. Isn't it wrong? You're going to find out how to do it next month. Alright? So check it out August 7th, which is actually, surprisingly, the first Tuesday of the month. We're here to see Jeff. That's here. Gentlemen, ladies, Jeff. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you guys know I run BocaJS with Jeremy? Do we get that? Yes. Yeah. But you have to sign up. Yeah. Eventually. I'll give it on.
Can everyone hear me all right? All right.
Woohoo! We'll turn it down if you have to.
Okay. I'm just going to leave this slide up for a minute, but we're going to be talking about Nightwatch.js, which is an end-to-end testing framework in Node that you can use to test your websites or web applications. I'm leaving this up so just a note, you will need Java to run any of this.
Java.
Java. Java.
Without the script?
Without the script.
I don't understand.
No. No matter how hard you try, it's not going away.
I think that all the .NET developers and it's going, into the future. It's like, oh, which future? I mean, no. Yeah, Java. I'm like, really? 30 years old? The future is here.
Okay. A little about myself. I'm Jeffrey Holland. I'm a senior software engineer for a company called Ackman & Dickinson based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I moved here 3 years ago and still work remotely for them. We're a digital agency, so we do a lot of digital marketing as well as software development. We take projects in-house or we contract people out, and that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. I work for a company that was recently purchased by Gannett, whose biggest property is USA Today, but they're media. If you're at all interested, we may have some remote opportunities available, so you can see me after the talk. I'm the lead developer for a large site hosting platform. We recently, in the last year, decided to not work with a third-party vendor and are now developing sites on our own. We use Pantheon as our WordPress platform. Currently, we have 1,500 sites, and we're looking to add thousands more every year. I have extensive experience with JavaScript and Ruby. I've been a full-time Rails developer for 7 years, and I've done a lot of work with JavaScript in my time. One of the projects was a third-party library that companies would put on their website for lead management results. And I've also spent a lot of time doing React. And I like to think of myself as a code janitor. Not a ninja, not a rock star. I like to go in and keep things clean. And this is my very first talk.
No way. There's no way that's true.
Yep. No, that's Jeb Bush. His please clap moment.
Not all white all the time.
I was going to do a Jeb Bush theme talk, but I decided to move away from that. Okay, so let's talk about what you're going to learn tonight. We're going to talk about why you should test. We're going to talk about how to get started with Nightwatch.js. We're going to talk about automating your testing. We're going to then dive into page objects and commands. So these are things that page objects allow you to take a certain section of the DOM and work with that on its own. And commands are used to create kind of higher level functions that you can use like you're using other commands in the vanilla Nightwatch library. And then we're going to move on to advanced Nightwatch topics. So we'll talk about running your tests in parallel. We'll talk about integrating with CI, integrating with other services like Sauce Labs, or doing visual regression testing. So the other question is, why Nightwatch.js? There are so many different testing libraries out there you can use. If you're already in JavaScript, you know Mocha, Chai, Jasmine, amongst others. Well, Nightwatch is end-to-end, so it's built on proven technologies. One of those is Selenium, which has been used for years for browser testing, Node, Mocha, and Nightwatch is currently in 1.0 beta, so it's been around for a while. It's JavaScript, so we all use JavaScript. It should be pretty easy to write our tests. It emphasizes organized and reusable code. So as you work through Nightwatch on your own, and as you start to use it more, you'll find that there are ways to make the code simpler and more straightforward, so your tests are your tests, and the commands that you're calling all the time, you can pull those out and refactor them. And there are so many resources on the web. This is one of the easiest test frameworks I've ever used for getting my answers for questions that I had. And it's fun and easy to use. An example of that is I was tasked with finding a framework, and I had Nightwatch up and running with 20 tests in under an hour. Like I mentioned, I have had a lot of JavaScript experience, but I've never gotten a test framework up and running that quickly. So the question you may be asking is, why test? How many people here test currently? How many people don't test? Just any test. Okay. Maybe you're saying nobody tests around here, you got the wrong team. Or we believe in testing nothing. Well, we can work with the nihilists, we can work with that. Everyone's seen The Big Lebowski, right? Yes, okay. So I just wanted to discuss my experience with Nightwatch.js. Like I mentioned, we have 1,500 sites, and we manage the theme. So what happens is, if you're a company, you come to us and you say, we want a website for our business, and we will make you that site on WordPress. You select from maybe 26 themes that we have currently. You select from 26 themes. We have a fulfillment team. They get the images, they get the information, they build out the site. 3 or 4 weeks later, we can deliver it. But we're constantly updating the theme, we're constantly updating plugins, we're constantly making changes. We need a way for us to make sure that whenever we update the theme, none of the 1,500 sites breaks. And so we have to go through and we have to apply those changes to a dev environment and test against the current prod environment and make sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to. So we're using automated testing to do that. So you may be thinking, well, yeah, that's just your opinion about testing. But do you see what happens when you don't test? Could you imagine 500 clients calling us after we make an update that their site's broken, or they're getting the white screen of death on WordPress? So enough about the testing. Let's actually take a look and start digging into Nightwatch. Oops. I went one too far. So this is the repo and the code that I linked to that's on my GitHub. These are the latest changes. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to need to set up Nightwatch. So if you were starting from scratch, you do an npm init, and you start filling out the information. You put your organization team, the author, the license, everything like that. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to do an npm install. Nightwatch, yes. I'm sure you can use Yarn. I don't have much experience with Yarn, but I've used it before, and yeah, you could use something else to manage the dependencies. Okay. So I have a README file that has all this set up too, so you can take a look at that. That's the front page of the repo. But you would want to do an npm install -- save Nightwatch. What is it called? Oh, okay. Not yet. Okay. You'd want to do an npm install save Selenium server. And Chrome driver. Those are the 3 things you need to get started. We're going to be using Chrome in this example, or in these examples, but you can use Firefox, the Gecko engine, Safari, and Edge. You can use Microsoft Edge too if you're on the Windows platform. So you will set up the package. Let's see. So we've got all the dependencies in here. Then you can do an npm install and an npm run Nightwatch. What I've done to do that is I've added inside scripts a Nightwatch command so that I can just call npm run Nightwatch, and it'll do it for me. I know if you're using gulp or grunt, you can create commands that way too, but I found it's easiest to just run it from npm. And if we run that, then if you have no tests in there, it'll just run. Otherwise, the test will get started, and we'll start seeing some progress. So now the next step is to set up the configuration. This is going to give us all the options we need. The configuration can get advanced for your needs in Nightwatch. It really supports a lot of stuff, but out of the box, there's maybe 20 lines of configuration code that you're going to use, and you can get started right away. You can pull the configuration file from Nightwatch.js.org, the example that they give, and you're ready to start right away. You can set up your config in two ways. It can either be Nightwatch.json or Nightwatch.conf.js. I prefer this one. You need to make sure that you include the Selenium server and the driver that you're going to use. And then we do a module.exports with the settings. Can everyone see, by the way? Can everyone see the code? Okay. Custom command path is where we're going to store our own functions. The page objects path is where we're going to store our page objects. Both of them can be an array, so you can organize your code and have separate directories for that. And the source folders is where your tests are going to be. And you can see I actually have a couple examples commented out because I don't want all the tests to run until I'm ready to show them to you. We set up the Selenium settings, and they're pretty basic. We let Nightwatch start and stop the server. Obviously, that might be different if you're already using Selenium inside your stack. You could set that to false if you've got it running in the background for some reason. We get the path from the package. We set the port, and we give it an argument of which driver to use in that location. We have another test settings section. We are giving it a lot of the same information here. We can also give it global variables that we can use inside of any test. So these become accessible just as URL and wait time. And the desired capabilities give us more advanced functionality with the specific driver we're using. I have these commented out to show you later, but we can give it the Chrome options. We can tell it to go headless, so we never see anything pop up and see the output. No sandbox, we can disable the GPU. And you can set window size. So if you want to test a site in mobile, let's say you have a responsive site, you can set this to the pixel setting that the viewport would be, and the site is going to be in the mobile format. Test workers is an advanced command we'll get to when we want to run in parallel. We can give it as many workers as we want or set it to auto. And this is a function that Nightwatch snarkily recommends you use so that you don't have the pad left fiasco from a couple years ago where they pulled that package off NPM. You'd want to disable the GPU when it's headless because you're not going to see it. You don't need it to use any of that rendering power. You know, you're not going to be watching video while you're running the test, so you're probably just going to want to let it find that element and move on. Yes, great comment. Yeah, so another thing that we can set is a screenshot directory, and then we can use a tool that will take screenshots of the page if we want to do more simple visual regression testing with a framework. Or you can set it so that if there's an error, it will take a screenshot and you can see what was going on with the page when that happened. So what makes, yes? It is a WordPress site. And so what we need to do is we need to test the back-end admin portion and the front end. Yep. But you can test anything. You can test any web app. Anything that's accessible through the browser should be accessible through Selenium. So what makes great tests? They keep the bugs for each community or your project. If you've got tests covering certain things, you know, those tests will break if you've introduced a bug. They're good and they're thorough. They mark your error rate 0, or hopefully as close to 0 as possible. They help document your code. Actually, good tests will help document your code. A lot of times, if you're on a new project, you can look at the tests and see what's happening in the code and what's supposed to be happening. And they really tie the project together. So now we're going to start taking a look at examples of the tests. So our first test is going to be the simple Google search. So inside the Google example directory, I have one test, and that's the Google tests. In Nightwatch, every file is a test. Each function is a step. That's how they're named. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll find the Google text box. Now the way tests work is you will use a module.exports, and Nightwatch will be able to suck up all the functions that you've defined in there, and it runs them sequentially. For each function that's in here, you send it a browser, and that's the browser object from Selenium, so you have access to the entire browser. So once we have that browser object, we'll say URL, and we'll go to browser.global.url. This matches the global value I have right here. I set everything as environment variables locally because I do have a username and password in here, and I did the same thing with Google, but you can just set that as a string. And we call wait for element visible. You want to use something like wait for element visible over pause, because as soon as it finds the element, it moves on. So if it takes it 50 milliseconds to find it, it doesn't use the whole 100, your tests are going to run faster. You're not wasting that extra time. The only reason I have pauses in here is because I can actually show you what's happening in the browser because I'm not running this headless, and it gives us the opportunity to see it. Nightwatch provides assertions, so we can assert that an element is present. In this case, this is the tag and the class for the search box. Then we can set a value, and we can see what happens. So I'm going to run Nightwatch. I'm going to pull up the browser, and if I didn't screw this up, it should fill it in. And then it's going to quit. I'm going to uncomment these tests. This is actually going to run the search. So now this test looks just like the other one, except we wait for an element to be visible. This is the button that says search Google. We're going to wait for it to be visible, then we're going to click it and we're going to wait so we can see what the results are. So that was the first test. Now we're going through the second. And now we found Google results for BocaJS. I'm removing comments as I go, because I just want to step everyone through what's happening. Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. So Selenium gives you the opportunity to switch browser windows. It usually puts them in an array, so you'll have like tab 1 or tab 0, tab 1, tab 2. You can move through them. Yep. Now, yeah. GSFI. Oh, I clicked the button LSB, yeah. Hmm?
Thank you. Sometimes it's hard to select a particular element on the page. So it may be buried in the DOM. Let's say you've got 3 text boxes inside of a table. They don't have any style to distinguish which one is which. It's just the first, second, and third one. So in Protractor, they have their own syntax for selecting it. It's not just a regular JavaScript selector.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering what kind of selectors you're using here.
These are CSS selectors. You're actually just a little bit ahead of me.
Okay.
But that's a great question. There are other CSS selectors that you can use that are nth child, and you can put in a number. So like if you know that there's 3 text boxes and it's the third one, you can do nth2, nth3, okay, and bring that up. And I actually have an example of that.
Great.
Yep.
But my point is, are these Nightwatch selectors, or you said
Nope.
they're more generally just CSS selectors?
These are just straight CSS selectors.
I like that better than what I'm using now, to be quite
Okay.
honest with you.
Yeah, so Nightwatch supports 2 selector types, CSS selectors and Xpath, and it allows you to interchange them. It's very easy. So you'll get to a certain point where you have a lot of tests and you don't want CSS selectors just through your code in your tests. So what you want to do is you want to use page objects. And so I'm just, I'm gonna make these go much faster so that we can see them, but we're not going to be waiting so long. So now we're going to use page objects. And so I'm going to move over and show you the page object, but that's something that we had saved in the config file. What a page object lets you do is it lets you set a URL so you can tell it to navigate here. And this page object could be used on many pages or it could be specific to a certain URL. This one is going to be specific to the search page of Google. And then we give it a bunch of elements. And we can name them whatever we want. So this one will be search box. And it's going to be input.gsfi, which on the Google homepage, and I'll pull it up so you can see. But that's the search box. And then the button to search will be input.lsb. And this is exactly what we had in the other test. But now, instead of using the browser, we tell the browser to give us .page.pageObject. And the page object is the same name as the page object file. So you can see over here it's called google.js. So the page object will be accessed with .google. So now we have a Google variable, and we tell it to navigate, where before we told the browser to .url, to go there. So we just tell it, go to the URL that's set, and we do the exact same thing. I'm going to wait for the body to be visible, but now I'm going to assert that an element is present, and it's going to be the search box instead of the selector. And then I'm going to set a value, and I'm going to search. I'm going to wait for the search button to be visible, and then I'm going to search. I actually had to make this change yesterday. Google updated their search page, and so they actually now add a search button at the bottom of the drop-down list that they give you. But you can't pause on a page object, so we're going to tell the browser to pause at the end so we can see what's happening. and it should do its stuff. Both tests work, one without page objects and one with. So the page objects are really nice. They give a nice level of organization. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to mention with the automated testing is there's some pretty cool stuff that you can do with automated test frameworks that aren't testing. So I used to work with someone that was salaried, worked 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, but still had to fill out a timesheet. So he used an automated test to fill in a timesheet every week and submit it. I know other people have, you know, like a limited release item, like when the Switch came out or when a new iPhone comes out. You can set up an automated test, go to an inventory search page, and just search it every 20 minutes to see if an item shows up. You know, an inventory somewhere if you want to go get that. So there's other cool stuff you can do with the automated testing frameworks to automate things that aren't necessarily your tests. So we use the page objects in this test, but now we're going to go take a look at commands before we start the next example. So the page objects were real simple exports. The commands are just a little more advanced. One thing that I wanted to do was, instead of having to put in a time, I wanted a constant time for when I'm waiting for something to be visible. So I created, instead of wait for element visible, I just called it wait for element. And what happens is I pass an element, and it takes that global variable I set of a wait time, which is 5 seconds. That's enough for our sites. And then it returns the browser object. So now in a test, I could just call dot wait for element and give it that element, and it's going to find it. But you can do other repeatable tasks too. So every single time I'm doing a new test file, it's going to want to log back in. It's not going to be able to reuse the same spot that a different test file was. So I've log into admin command. And so it takes the URL of the WordPress admin panel, and I wait for the login ID to be visible. And I put in the username and the password, and I click submit. And then I wait for the admin menu to be visible. And so I can put that at the top of every test file that's going to be in the WordPress admin. So these commands are reusable components, but another cool thing that you can do is you can actually put commands with your page objects. I don't have an example of that, but you can start creating commands. Put something in here, and then that command would be accessible to this specific page object. So certain things that you're going to use multiple times on the same page, you don't have to rewrite that logic. So now we're going to take a look at some real-world examples. So I've got a WordPress instance set up, and I'm going to show you some of the tests that we're actually using to make sure that, you know, our sites are working correctly when we do theme updates. Oops. Okay. So we're going to take a look at the simple WordPress example. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to test all the menus. Has everyone seen the back end of WordPress? Anyone not seen it? You have all the menus on the left-hand side. So what we're going to do is this one called Dashboard is going to be the whole WordPress admin. And then I'm going to break out menu sections, and we'll go take a look at that page object. So before we had elements, and then we just listed all the elements. If you use the sections keyword, you can break it into separate sections. You name that section, then you can have multiple elements inside of it. So what I want to do is I want to go and I want to hover over the posts and I want to see all the sub-menu items. And then I'd like to go to pages and I'd like to hover over the sub-menu items and make sure that, you know, for each menu, everything is what I'm expecting. And so I went through and I took a look and I grabbed all the selectors. And I grabbed more selectors. And I grabbed more selectors. But see, you can nest your selectors. And then you can use, you know, kind of the pseudo classes to get nth child. And you map it all out. It is a lot of code, but it's very clear on what's going on and how you've divided it, and you can logically make it look like what you're testing. So that's a page object, yes. Oh yeah, yep. You can select an element by ID, you can select an element by class, you can select it by name, and then you can start getting into Xpath selectors, which I'll try to mention when we get to some of the more advanced stuff. So I log into admin. I assert that the menu is visible and it contains the correct text. And then I use move to element, which is something from Selenium. And I give it an offset of 5 pixels, X and Y, just to make sure that if I'm right at 0, 0, that doesn't cause any problems. And I do use a pause here. There was a technical reason in that waiting for the element wasn't working. And this will happen with the test. Sometimes what you want it to do doesn't work, but there is another option. And then I assert that when I'm hovered over the posts, I see all these sub-menu items. And, whoops. And at the end, you always want to end the browser session, so I just pull it out as a separate function. Okay, that was fast. Let me add. Let's try that again. So I log in, and I made sure that all the new items were there. Now I'm going to make this test a little more advanced. I'm testing all the submenus. And I'm doing something a little different. Some may have seen that every function takes a browser object. And inside this function, I was having to create my page objects. For each step, you have to create the page objects. So one way we can make this code reusable is to use the before function. The before function takes the browser, and since I've already set the values to null up here, before any of the tests run, I set their page objects, and then they're always accessible to me. So if I go ahead and run this test, let's see. It logs in, and it hovers over every menu and makes sure that everything is there. And it's doing something else. I forgot to comment this test out. But working with one page is pretty easy. We figured out how to use hover, so we're moving along. We're going to go to the really advanced test. So I've defined, these are all the page objects I'm going to use. So we're going to work with pages. We're actually going to work with the pages section of WordPress. Let's take a look at the page objects. So I've got the page list. When you click on all pages, you're going to see a list of all the available pages. Then I can see the title. I can see how to add a new page. I can see the message. Here's an example of Xpath. So like you had mentioned about it being difficult to find something, it was very difficult to find the title. So I was able to create an Xpath selector that said if the text is testing, this is what I'm looking for. We're going to change the name from testing to testing 2. So we're going to actually rename the page. And I've got access to the trash. So I can go into the trash and I can delete all the deleted pages that I've created. But I've also got now a part of this as a page object for the page editor. So I've got the page editor body. I've got its title section. I've got its content section. I've got its publish button. I've got its move to trash link. And I have the page trash section where I can find the body. I can choose the delete all input and clear it out. So in those tests, I'm going to create a page. I have to use all these all these page objects to do it. I can edit the page. I can delete the page, and it empties the trash. So it's going to do the menus again. And now you can see it edit the page. All right, so I just went through an entire process that someone would do in WordPress. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I haven't done any of the front-end tests. I didn't put anything on the site, but you can verify. So first, for the back end, we have a lot of features for the client so that they can make changes, or for the fulfillment team. And so we've had a lot of problems with there just being errors because we have a lot of custom functionality to WordPress. It's not, I wouldn't call it super advanced, but we've got something called locations. So we handle a map. You can put in, the location of your business. But when we first created it, we were short-sighted, and you could only put one location. So now we need multiple locations, and we need to test the ability to add multiple locations. we have call to actions. So we've got portions of the site that if you turn on call to actions, it's going to have a button with your phone number. And someone can just click that button on their mobile phone and it will call your pizza place. But it was short-sighted again. We only supported one number. But what happens if you had a Boca location and a West Palm location? So it allows us to test that functionality. We have a lot going on the back end that we need to test. Yep.
It still requires a lot of. So once you develop a test and you feel you have 100% coverage and you're happy with it, these tests still require, I would imagine, a lot of maintenance to keep them from any changes in browsers or whatever.
Yeah, so we're still starting with this. Our goal is to be able to test everything. And right now we can only test one site. So for example, by September 30th, if you come up and talk to me, hopefully I can tell you that we're testing 52 sites. So that's all the different themes with 2 versions of the site. And then our goal is to actually use live client sites as test data and test everything basically. So, you know, we still have a long way to go. One nice thing about Nightwatch is you can test in every environment. So you can set it up so that, you know, we're just using Chrome right now, but we could set it up so it runs the test through Chrome and then it runs them through Firefox and then it runs them through Safari and we can set the different sizes. So we can say we're going to test it on the desktop and we're going to test it on a mobile. So things like that. When it comes to the front end, you can test styles. So you can make sure that something is the correct size because you can get that from the browser. You can test color, location, not image color, but you can make sure that something that you set up, you know, in the editor is showing up the correct way on the front end. And what we do is, we actually, my company, my actual company, is the developer of the themes for the company I'm contracted to. So it's a very interesting thing because I've actually never worked with people from my company besides the ones that have been contracted to. I work with Reach Local, who's part of Gannett now. And so it's very interesting that other people that I'm true colleagues with are working on the themes, but we give them a list. And we say these are the things and these are the criteria. And the same criteria that we use to manually test to give it the okay is what we're trying to use to build the tests that go into Nightwatch. So if we say the call to action buttons, they need to have certain padding, or you need to be able to at least set the padding on these buttons left and right. Well, we can test that we can go in the back end and set that. We can also test that it's showing up on the front end. So we can add as many tests as we'd like for something like that. Any other questions at the moment? Yeah.
Or are they specific to each site?
Great question. Right now they are. Right now they are. Oh, I'm sorry. They are reusable. Yep. Right now they are reusable. We're trying to get as much coverage for everything as we can. There's a tagging mechanism with Nightwatch, a tagging mechanism with Nightwatch. And so what we want to do is in the Pantheon platform, you can add tags to a site. So we could say the site is on this version of the theme, give it a tag of that version number. We could give it a tag of the actual theme it's using. We could give it other tags. And then when we've got the entire list of sites that we want to test, we can pull its tags and use the tagging mechanism in Nightwatch to say, also run these tests, because we've tagged them as such. Yep. That's one of our goals to get to.
I have a question. So Google just recently, as in 3 months ago, released Chromeless Chrome, right? No UI.
Yep.
So did that, do you know if they support it?
Yep.
Okay. So there's no Selenium
If
then,
it's
right?
not there, it's coming for sure. There's actually a way to run the Chrome driver without Selenium, and it may be tied to that. Yeah.
So you've selected Nightwatch. Did you compare with any other testing frameworks prior to selecting? And I'm curious what others might be of a similar quality to this one. What do you think?
Oh, I can't remember all the names right now. There was one that another colleague had recommended to me. It had a smaller memory footprint, and I can find the name right after the talk for you. It had a smaller memory footprint, but it wasn't as easy to use as Nightwatch. One thing that really got me is it only took me an hour to get 20 tests up and running. I mean, it was super simple, and it's been really easy to transfer knowledge to other people to use. We've used like Water, which is Selenium with Ruby, and some other stuff, and it takes a lot longer for people to get up to speed on it. And this one came much faster even for people that don't use JavaScript. So that was a huge plus for us, the amount of information that's out there and the reliability of it.
That's another question. So if I go look up information on Nightwatch, how many sites am I going to come across, would you say, compared with some of the other testing frameworks out there?
You will come across dozens, and you'll come across answers.
Okay.
That's the thing, is that you'll come across answers. You're not going to find a lot of like hanging questions. If you get to like a GitHub issues page or something, you're gonna find answers. Another key thing about Nightwatch that steered us towards this is it was a first-class citizen at Gannett. So this is one of the 2 frameworks that they like actively are using and support. They own USA Today. Yep, big newspaper company and media company.
To answer your question, Mark, that I've been using, not that I don't know how it compares, I just happened to run into it, and it was Casper and PhantomJS. And PhantomJS is essentially, so Casper is like Nightwatch, and PhantomJS is like Selenium, right? Mm-hmm. But it sort of hooks into Chrome, and it was Chromeless Chrome before Chromeless Chrome. And now Google has their own library. Again, you interface to that library, it interfaces with the browser. That only works with Chrome, and that's the beauty of this, that it can handle, you know, any browser out there. Most of the other solutions will choose a particular one, right? So PhantomJS is Chrome. There's another one which is just Firefox. This one you can point to different things. One of the benefits of the ones I was talking about, and this was one of the requirements that we need, because we needed to start like 30,000 tests all at the same time, and we would just ramp up a computer with full memory, 256 gigs of memory, and it would just run all 30,000 tests. Can it run multiple tests at the same time? Yeah. Since it's...
Yep, we're going to get to that. Yep, that's one of the advanced topics. Yeah, but I mean, our goal is we want to utilize Gannett's Jenkins platform, and we want that to scale, and we want to be running 100, 200, 300 instances, you know, to test multiple sites and multiple platforms at the same time, because if we've got 1,500 sites now, and we want to test all those themes, and the test suite's going to end up taking 20, 30 minutes to run, that's going to take forever for us to verify that the theme's ready. If we can run stuff in parallel on multiple instances, it's really gonna move for us. I'm trying to use the Keynote remote, and it's not finding. There we go. All right. So now let's talk about service integrations, parallel runners, and CI. So with the service integrations, you've got things like Sauce Labs, where you can offload a lot of this testing on different browsers and different viewports. This is the Nightwatch.js site. They've got continuous integration support, browser stack, and they also allow for extending the framework. To run tests in parallel is pretty easy. We just have to edit the config. So I'm going to turn the test workers back on. And I'm going to turn all my tests back on. Oops. Actually, I'm going to turn the test workers off. I'm going to take out some of the pauses. And we're just going to run all the tests. This should only take about 20, 30 seconds at most. Oh, it's fine.
James, what's going on?
I'm on my last slide, so yeah.
Nobody's seeing us anyways.
Okay. So it took 39, almost 40 seconds. Now we're going to run them in parallel, and we should see that time cut down by quite a bit. It's going to start the child processes for each, and it's going to spit them out on the screen as soon as they're done. I think the last one is the one that deals with all the page edits and updates. There we go, 22 seconds. So I ran all 4 in parallel, and we were almost able to cut that down by half. So when you have the throughput, running them in parallel is a really good idea for that. Now the other thing that I did when I first set this up was I wanted to make sure that it was ready for our continuous integration, because that's the whole point of it, that's where we want it to go. So I was able to put this in a Docker container. And there are several Docker containers out there that support Nightwatch. I took from that and built on whatever I needed, which wasn't very much. And so in our repo at work, it actually comes with a Docker container. And what we say is develop locally, but run it through Docker before you push any PRs up with the test changes, because we have to make sure that it's not running for some reason on your local environment, but it won't run on CI. And like I said, that's the whole goal. For these theme tests, we're probably going to run 10,000 instances for the 15,000 or 1,500 sites to make sure that, you know, the themes are working the way they want. So I've been talking about WordPress sites, but you can apply this to whatever website, web app you're doing. You can just make sure that, you know, everything you're looking for is out there. And that's it. Any other questions? Yeah.
First we clap, then the questions, you know that, because they may not want to clap after they hear your answers.
Yeah.
Guys, I have a microphone. I have 2, in fact.
Thanks, Jeff. That was a wonderful presentation. I have a couple of questions on the last slide about the CI piece. I'm also currently working on the same CI continuous integration, or the so-called one-click deployment to production, whatever you call. So my current challenge is like, I have to integrate the other pieces like security, API integration, flat file configuration, where my tests are not driven by code, but they are driven by some XML config file, which I give to somebody who don't know about the coding, but when they want to run, change whatever the test they want to run, say yes or no, and just run it. And the security piece, the second piece that I'm talking about now for entire world is moving towards API, REST APIs. So they are using different security mechanisms like HMAC, OAuth, whatever. So can we also use that part of this Nightwatch? Because CI needs that to do the end-to-end.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to see more of what's going on with the security piece. But with the configuration, yeah, because really what you can do is that configuration can talk to the CI, and then the CI can pass down the information as like an environment variable or something that then the test can pick up. So for sure that part would work, because that's exactly what we want to do. I mean, we're going to have this whole list of sites, and we'll be telling each CI instance, like, this is a site you're going to test, this is a site, this is the viewport, things like that. So,
but you don't need this very much, because Angular is moving more to React, I believe it is, and then using a lot of API in the back end. For what you're talking about, there are several libraries that are, I've done exactly what you mean. So I've made automated tests for an API, even though it's browser software that's hitting it, right? And then it pretends to do something a browser can't, like send a delete method, which a browser can't. So, and when we fake the cookies and we do things like that, and you can do that, but there are other libraries that can make it much easier for that, because that's, you know, there's no interaction. These things excel when there's interaction needing, when you need to check something, not make a request and this beautiful JSON file that automatically becomes an object you can test and you can check and you can for loop in without having to think about the fact that, oh my goodness, somebody just added some new element. Now it's not, like your question, not the 50th element, it's the 52nd element. And so this might be an overkill for what you're talking about, but there are other libraries or just basic programming that can test API, for APIs you're talking about specifically.
I understand what you're asking now.
The situation is like you're searching Google Books, for example. Google is coming up with APIs, and you are an organization where you have to pass your specific security key. You have your private key, and on the public domain there is a public key as well. You send with your private information. It's untampered. It maintains its integrity, and you get the response. That piece is what I have a kind of a challenge where I send the request, but I have to send with that integrity. When it comes, okay, I got these n number of books. Are they available on my website or so-called website or not? This is what I need to check. So I kind of search for those libraries. I'm currently using a different tool where I have to use a .NET library and not the Java piece, but I'm just new to this, so just trying to understand that.
No, one of my QA people asked the same thing. He wanted to, you know, hit REST endpoints, but so he needed to do web testing, but for some of the stuff he wanted to just hit the endpoints, make sure that, you know, the JSON that was coming back was correct, and then he can move on and test the web, test the web component.
Do you know what the answer for that is?
I don't have the answer.
Postman.
Well, yeah.
No, I'm serious, because you can make Postman do steps. Postman is a service, you know what it's about.
Yeah, I'm using Postman.
So Postman, for those of you guys who don't know, it's a way to pretend to be a REST client, not a client and all that. And what I'm talking about in this specific case is you can make it do the full OAuth authentication, get back the token, send it to the next step, get back something, and send it to the third one. And it's kind of manual at the end. I don't think there's any way to, you can automate that step, but there's no way to go and say, oh, this failed, so let me do a screenshot, and like you do in this one, when you fail, you screenshot it and then you send it off to a developer or a Slack channel. That there's no way to do that part, but at least it's a, and you can create all the different jobs and all the different schedules. So you can at least go and have the QA tester be able to do multiple tests where they don't have to step one, okay, copy, paste, step two. They can at least go, no, that's not what I wanted to see. It's failing. And let's see why, and they can tune. So it's not the final thing, but at least they can do what he wanted, which is a sort of a step to try different things. And, all that, so.
And Nightwatch is very extensible, so someone may have written something to integrate with that too.
I think most of the Selenium pieces can be integrated as well into Nightwatch, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
so
all of the Selenium pieces can, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
In the past, I've used the Selenium Java WebDriver to do web page testing. And I was curious, what's the relationship with Nighthawk and Selenium? Are they part?
It uses Selenium. You have to use
just
Selenium.
Uses it, okay.
Yep. So what I did was I used the Selenium standalone node package, because then I don't have to do anything. When I tell Nightwatch to run, it takes care of starting up Selenium and bringing it down.
Okay.
Yep.
In response to his question, I wasn't sure if I completely understood it, but couldn't you write like a simple just HTML page to drive the REST services, and then you use Selenium to run that web page?
But
Yeah.
now it's a clutch, right?
Right.
So the word, you're achieving one, you're overachieving a goal that you don't need to. You can skip them, the steps towards there. By the way, I think hopefully that answers your question. The original thing is, I don't know if you pointed it out, it's in there. Selenium is two parts. One, this grab Chrome and make it do things, and then the other one is the language you're used to.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this replaces the language. So instead of you having to do Java, even though it's close, it's another language you turn.
Right.
Once you do it in Node, in JavaScript, in no way, and you don't utilize the language part, but you utilize that hand, which is dragging and clicking and typing. That's the driver, right? That you're
Right.
using
Exactly.
without using the language and all that.
Yeah, and I've got to say, like, the Nightwatch documentation is excellent, and there's not too much to it. I mean, there's a lot, but there's not too much to it. What's difficult is you may not be used to some of the things, and so that's where a lot of the searches on the web are also very useful, finding Stack Overflow, issues on GitHub, things like that, pages people have written. But the API reference, you get expect, BDD style assertions, you get asserts. The commands are the commands that are straight from Nightwatch. So this is what we're extending when we write our own commands. And then the WebDriver protocol is straight from Selenium to work with the browser. So there's a lot there, yeah.
You said you're using this in production today?
Yes.
Can you tell us an example of a big win that you got out of it, like through this automation testing?
Nope, not yet. This is a very large stage project, and so just testing this one site, we really haven't had the big win yet.
Okay.
So it's just too early for. We haven't had much time allocated beyond a lot of the discovery and early development. So the next 3 months are going to be. Talk to me September 30th and make sure I still love Nightwatch and the whole thing as much as
So
I'm excited.
is that an analogy that you haven't had any have heart attacks, but you still have everybody eat better?
Yep.
So,
I can see the advantage of setting up test scripts, but of course there's a time cost, time and money cost.
Yep.
So to set this up, it looks like you have to be a programmer in order to understand how to set this up. So
Yep.
how much programming staff would you set up, allocate first?
You should turn around and ask come on, ask the developers in the room if it's true that we need a developer to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, the code you saw there was fairly, it was very clean. It could even be simplified further with, for example, you could have in your page object, click button or find text box. You could have some reusable, that's what I did. I made a couple of functions like that. And then when you do that, it really looks like you're documenting what the page does. Go find the first text box, enter the following text, click the button. That's what your test reads like. And so at that point, you don't need a full developer. You can use a QA who knows how to do scripting. So and it's not a lot of time. It's shocking, when you start doing this, you're like, hey, it's working. Well, you see, and that brings up a real point. How do you debug? Because you're running a separate process for the whole thing. It's not so easy to debug Protractor. It's not.
Yeah.
You don't just click the button and go into Chrome. There's a setup, and I couldn't get it working. So.
Yeah. So what I do, I put in a dot pause for probably 100 seconds, and I start looking at what the page is, right? I look at what I tried to select, and I make sure that it's visible, things like that. And then the other thing I do is I isolate everything I'm testing to just that test, so that when I run it, I'm not waiting 30 seconds for everything else to run and then get to it. But that's so far my debugging method. Yep. But with the pause and taking it, say, out of headless, because I usually just run it headless, so that I can see. I stop the browser, I go take a look at what's going on, and I reference that to the error messages I'm seeing.
Have you run into any problems, any stumbling blocks, anything like that?
Yeah. The biggest one I've run into are selector issues. Even when it has something that I should be able to find, and I'm having to drop down to Xpath. The problem with Xpath is it's slow. You know, especially when you're doing text, you're searching the whole page for the text. But luckily, computers are fast enough now that if I'm doing it just a few times, the performance cost is negligible.
You able to hear me now? Yeah,
Yep.
sorry. So as part of the debugging, maybe you can print whatever is visible on the page, and it's like something like you have mentioned now current selector is Xpath, you mentioned so and so text box. You print that whatever you're trying to identify that element, and whatever is working, that is you can ignore. Whatever is not working, you can say, okay, this is what it is. I have one question around here. I selected something Xpath, say ABC/so and so, but on runtime it was something different. Will I be able to differentiate these two? I can print what I selected during my test case creation. This problem generally happens when you have to run multiple browsers. Each browser has its own engine to interpret the code. Sometimes you might see there are some changes. The same scripts when you're running on multiple browsers, did you face that issue?
Not yet.
Not
Just
yet.
not yet, yeah. No,
Okay.
I haven't.
Yeah. Sometimes
run into that
the
one
same
yet.
element will be reflecting differently in the browsers of Chrome or Firefox or IE, where you might have to exactly debug here what is happening in Chrome, what is happening in IE, and what is happening in Firefox.
I've had something similar where we didn't know the ID of the element. So we had to do something like the 50th div down after this particular one. Or just loop through it until I find something that's unique about it, right? And then it's pain, but yeah, I know what you mean on that. But I haven't seen anything differently with the browser seeing different, because these are CSS selectors, so they should be fairly standard, right? And then it's going to be unusual if it doesn't support it. But yeah, you're going to find a problem with one particular browser. You have to figure out a different way to get to it. You're right.
The reason why we see that issues is now on the market, we have different frameworks coming from different organizations. Somebody will come, some framework for payment industry, card industry, finance industry. Those specific tools are creating this issue. If you are having a plain Java application, web-based application, or a .NET application, you can right away select it. But when you have those frameworks, they create their own frames differently based on the browsers. That's where you might end up this, where I'm currently experiencing that. So I might not be able to run in all the browsers unless I select this same element across all the browsers.
I think he's mentioned it earlier, that the solution would be that he defines which browser. So you can build a test that works with Chrome, and then if it's different for IE or Firefox, and then therefore that's the case and all that. So.
And worst case, you can try and find like a parent element and programmatically then try to find the exact element that you're looking for, you know, but another way without it's something that's changing on it.
Apart from this XPath, we can also go with the multiple descriptions of the element, right?
Yeah.
That is allowed. I mean, that is pretty much legitimate in Nightwatch, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Well, if you could, please leave some feedback, because I will be giving this talk twice more up north in Minnesota. So any feedback would be appreciated. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, guys. We have a giveaway. So I want you guys to all go to win, as in you're going to win.BocaJS, as in what you hear about, .org.
And you will see, if this comes up, you will see nothing. You will see your ticket. We will give away the raffle to the, oh, before I do that, this will come up in a minute. Can you go to our website? See money. Yeah.
So some little young lady told us that there is, at the Florida South Atlantic University, TED Talks is coming to Boca. I didn't know this. So there's a bunch of flyers in here. It's 10, what is 10, October? October 12th, 2018 at the Florida Atlantic University. Tickets are available now. Ideas worth one. And here's going to be the speaker. So if you want, just come up here. There's a bunch of flyers. Get one. I didn't realize that TED Talks were coming here. All right, we have some tickets. So again, if you guys, oh, that is the ticket, sorry. Win, period, BocaJS, period, ORG. So then what happens when I get kicked in the crotch? What you guys will see, oh, there we go. So is anybody having any troubles getting there? Trouble. Long time to get there? Took you a long time to get there? Or it's taken a long time to give you a ticket? Everybody gone to the website but not getting a ticket? No. That redirects to there because I don't want to spell that out. win.bocajs.org. Okay, so let's refresh. 17 of you guys, that's pretty close to everybody, right? So if you haven't done so already, this is the last chance, win.bocajs.org. All right. Come on, hurry up. Great. 0. Yeah, I have a feeling some of you guys have realized that if you go on your laptop and on your phone, you get 2 tickets. Boom. Oh, WebSockets. Nice. And that changed over there. So you have a license from not Telerik. I was going to say Telerik. Guys, every single month we do this, first Tuesday of the month. This month will be different. Next month is the amazing coding commander, Michelle there. Come and see us and see what's going on. We have another license for you. I'll have a license for you right today. We have another license next month. The 20th, we won't have a license, but I'll do something better. I'll give you about $50 worth of Arduinos and robots and all that. Literally a robot you take home to fight other robots. But you have to learn how to do it, and you have to prove me to do it. I'm going to give you a small Arduino chip worth about $5. You got to get it to blink a light. Woohoo! If you do, to move up to a robot that follows a little line, and if you do that, you fall up to a robot that's about the size of this laptop, and it's sumo wrestlers with the other people that are in that level. All provided by Microsoft. Guys, see you there. Check out my website, meetup.com/BocaJS. See you guys next month. Thanks. Jeff is here if you have questions. So am I.